Hello everybody, today's Memorial Day. Today's the day we're supposed to go out and remember the great men and women who have served and died for this country, for the best country, the United States of America. And today is exactly what we're going to be doing. In this video I'm going to be going through these magnificent stories of these men and women who have died for this country. For some reason, these men and women have been forgotten in history. Not everybody knows about these men and women. Perhaps because they can't put a ball in a hoop or throw a perfect spiral. But they've done something much greater. Sacrificed their life for our country, our freedom, and for their fellow men and women who've served. I'm not going to be playing my normal intro for this video. Out of respect, I'm going to be playing the national anthem. So without further ado, I'd appreciate if you'd stand up and honor this country. Honor the men and women who died for this country.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
The first man I want to remember in this video is Pat Tillman. He gave his life at just 27 years old. He is a safety for the Arizona Cardinals. Pat Tillman left the NFL in 2002. He ended up turning down a $3.6 million contract to join the Army. Pat Tillman ended up joining the Army Rangers. He ended up serving in many combat tours until his eventual death on April 22nd of 2004. It was thought that he was killed in combat from an enemy soldier, but then it was later brought to light that he was actually killed by a fellow soldier. What I find magnificent about this is that Pat Tillman had the life. He was set. He was a good football player. He had millions of dollars already. All he had to do was just keep playing in the NFL and he would have been fine. But instead of having that nice, luxurious life, he ended up giving all of that up to serve in the military, and he died fighting for this country. Supposedly it was an accidental death. I'm not completely sure about all the details about that. Next person I'd like to talk about is Ben Solomon. He was born September 1st of 1914. He went to the University of Southern California School of Dentistry, and he ended up getting a degree in dentistry there. And he ended up taking those skills to the battlefield. He ended up dying July 7th, 1944, at the age of 29. He was defending his patients on the Saipan Islands. He was defending his patients from a barrage of attacks, from an ambush. An estimated 3,000 to 5,000 Japanese forces attacked the 105th Infantry Regiment, 1st and 2nd Battalions. Although both units fought furiously, eventually the enemy ended up penetrating the perimeter, inflicting overwhelming numbers of casualties. While Solomon tended to victims, several Japanese soldiers managed to get inside of his medical tent. In an act of heroism, Solomon fought off enemies while ordering evacuations of his patients. In order to hold off the Japanese to ensure the safe withdrawal, Solomon, armed with a single rifle, continued to fight alongside soldiers who were still stationed inside of the perimeter. After 4 men managing heavy machinery were killed, Solomon single-handedly took control of it and ended up killing 90 Japanese soldiers before being fatally shot. I can't even explain how impressive this is and how he saved so many lives doing what he did, sacrificing his own life to save many others. He stopped 90 by himself. He stopped 90. He was stabbed by bayonets. He was shot multiple times, and he continued to fight even though he was outnumbered. He never once ran off, never backed down, and I find this to be one of the most impressive feats ever in U.S. military history. Michael Monsoor was born April 5th, 1981, in Long Beach, California. On September 29th, 2006, Monsoor platoon shot 4 insurgents in a firefight, Ramadi, killing one, injuring another. Anticipating further attacks, Monsoor and 3 SEAL snipers and these Iraq army soldiers took up a rooftop position. Civilians aiding in the insurgents blocked off the streets and nearby mosques, and nearby mosque broadcast a message for people to fight against the Americans and the Iraqi soldiers. Monsoor was protecting other SEALs, 2 of whom were 15 feet away from him. Monsoor's position made him the only SEAL on the rooftop with access to an escape route. A grenade was thrown on the rooftop by a combatant down below. The grenade hit Monsoor in the chest and immediately hit the floor. Monsoor yelled, "Grenade!" and jumped onto the grenade, covering it with his body. The grenade exploded seconds later. Monsoor's body absorbed most of the blast. Monsoor was severely injured and wounded, and although they evacuated immediately, he died 30 minutes later. 2 other SEALs next to him at the time were injured, but they both survived. Michael Murphy was born May 7th of 1976 in Smithtown, New York. Murphy was the commander for a 4-man reconnaissance team made up of himself, Danny Dietz, Matthew Axelton, and Marcus Lutterell. The team was tasked with conducting surveillance on a top leader. This man commanded a group of insurgents known as the Mountain Tigers. They were dropped off by a helicopter in a remote mountainous area east of Asadabad, near the Pakistan border. After an initial successful infiltration, local goat herders stumbled upon the SEALs' location. Unable to verify any hostile intent from the herders, the team cut them loose. Hostile locals, possibly the goat herders they released, alerted nearby Taliban forces, who surrounded them and attacked the small team. At the cost of his own life, Murphy was able to get the message out to friendly forces of their situation, which prompted reinforcements flown in on an MH-47 Chinook. The helicopter was shot down by an RPG, killing 16 personnel aboard, 8 SEALs, and the other 8 were 160th SOAR. Murphy was killed on the 28th of June, 2005 during Operation Red Wing. He had left cover and moved to a clearing away from the mountains, exposing himself to enemy fire in order to obtain signal for his satellite phone to contact headquarters, relay the situation, and request help. He dropped the satellite phone after being shot, but he managed to pick it back up. Murphy finished the call and signed off by saying thank you, then continued to fight from his exposed position until he died of his wounds. Mike Murphy, Danny Dietz, and Mike Axelton were all killed in action. Marcus was the only U.S. survivor and was eventually rescued after have wandered the mountains before being taken by friendly local Afghan villagers.
Times, and then he said it again. I was like, Taliban? And he was like, American? And then he kind of put his hands up, and I came off my trigger, kind of wanting to kill him. And he started walking down on me. He's like, okay. Shampoo, hydrate. That's what he's telling me, shampoo, hydrate.
Shampoo, hydrate?
That's what he said. 2 English words he knew. I was like, shampoo, hydrate. You know how good that sounded? I was like, bro, I would love some water, and if you want to wash my hair.
Their team became the most decorated in Navy SEAL history. Mike Murphy was 29 years old at the time of his death. Robert Miller was born October 14th of 1983. January 25th, 2008, ODA 3312 embarked on a pre-dawn joint combat patrol with Afghan National Security Forces in the Kunar province near the Pakistan border. Twice along their route, they were forced to use demolitions to remove boulders blocking the road, knowing that these often were used to effect ambushes. The patrol detached and dismounted element, with Miller taking point to the Providence Overwatch for the vehicles. Upon reaching the target area, they identified enemies. Upon reaching the target area, they identified enemy position with a drone, then initiated contact. Miller began laying fire from his vehicle with an MK-19 grenade launcher. When it was disabled, he switched to a mounted M240 machine gun, all while identifying the enemy position for an airstrike. Following the airstrike, the patrol moved forward to perform a bomb damage assessment. As the only SF member who spoke Pashto, Miller organized the Afghan fighters and took point once again. While crossing the exposed area, insurgents dug behind cover, sprung an ambush, and poured rifle, machine gun, and rocket-propelled grenade fire down at them. Their team was caught with little to no cover. Insurgents' reinforcements arrived, swelling the enemy to nearly 150 fighters. Instead of retreating, Miller charged forward and eliminated a machine gun team, several fighters who were keeping his teammates pinned. Seeing that his team was still in danger, he charged forward using his M249 saw and fragmentation grenades to kill or wound at least 10 insurgents. Only once his team had found cover did he begin to pull back. As he maneuvered, Miller was wounded in the chest around this time. His team's commander also been seriously wounded in the chest and shoulder and called for their forces to fall back. Instead, Miller pushed the fight, engaging the enemy and drawing their fire so that his captain would be pulled to safety. Cut off and alone, Miller continued to push the fight, calling out enemy positions for his teammates while engaging them until he had expended all of his saw ammo at his last grenade. He was still alive when two of his teammates got to his position and began to provide medical care, but died moments later. In all, the firefight lasted 7 hours and required quick reaction forces, reinforcements, and additional close air support. To finish the engagement, the enemy suffered 40-plus deaths and 60-plus wounded, which of Miller himself killed 16 and wounded 30. His courageous actions saved his 8-man team and the 15 Afghans with them. Travis Akins was born December 9th of 1975 in support of the Operation Iraqi Freedom. While conducting route security in the town, Staff Sergeant Atkins apprehended and began to search a group of suspected insurgents. However, one of the insurgents resisted and engaged Staff Sergeant Atkins in hand-to-hand combat. As Staff Sergeant Atkins attempted to subdue the man, he realized that the Staff Sergeant was attempting to trigger the suicide vest, which he wore under his clothing. Despite the Staff Sergeant Atkins' efforts, the resurgent finally succeeded in reaching his vest. Staff Sergeant Atkins selflessly tackled the suicide bomber in a bear hug, pinning him to the ground, shielding soldiers from the immediate explosion. In this critical, selfless act of valor, in which he was mortally wounded, Staff Sergeant Atkins saved the lives of 3 other soldiers who were with him, and he gave his life for his country. Staff Sergeant Atkins' undaunted courage, warrior spirit, and steadfast devotion to duty reflect great credit upon himself and 2D Bridge Combat Team of the United States Army. Gary Gordon was posted in Somalia with other Delta members in the summer of 1993 as a part of Task Force Ranger. On October 3rd, 1993, Gordon was a sniper team leader during the Battle of Mogadishu, which began as a joint force mission to apprehend key advisors of the Somali warlord Mohammed Adid. During the assault, Super 6-1, one of the Army's Black Hawk helicopters providing insertion and air support to the assault team, was shot down and crashed in the city. A combat search and rescue team was dispatched to the first crash site, and a short time later, a second Black Hawk, Super 6-4, was shot down as well. Ranger forces on the ground were not able to assist the downed chopper. The forces Rangers on the ground were not able to assist the downed helicopter crew of the second crash site, as they were already engaged in heavy combat with Adid's militia while making their way to the first crash site. Gordon and his Delta Force sniper teammates were providing sniper cover from the air, wanted to be dropped at the second crash site in order to protect the 4 critically wounded crew. Despite the fact that large numbers of armed, hostile Somalis were converging on the area, mission commanders denied Gordon's request, saying that the situation was already too dangerous for the 3 Delta snipers to effectively protect Black Hawk crew from the ground. Command position was that the sniper could be more of assistance by continuing to provide air cover. Gordon, however, concluded that there was no way the Black Hawk crew could survive on their own. He repeated his request twice until he finally received permission. Halling had assumed control of the minigun after crew chief was injured. Once on the ground, Gordon and Shogart, armed with only their personal weapons and their sidearms, fought their way to the downed Black Hawk. By this time, Somalis were arriving intent on either capturing or killing American servicemen. When they reached Super 6-4, Gordon and Shogart extracted the pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Michael Durant, co-pilot Ray Frank, and crew chiefs Bill Cleveland and Tommy Field from the aircraft, and established defense position around the crash site. Despite having inflicted heavy casualties, the Somalis, the 2 Delta snipers, were outnumbered. Despite having inflicted heavy casualties on the Somalis, 2 Delta snipers were outnumbered and outgunned. Gordon and Shogart were killed by Somali gunfire and believed that Gordon was the first to be killed. Shogart revived Gordon. Shogart retrieved Gordon's Car-15 and gave it to Durant to use. Shortly afterwards, Shogart was killed and Durant was taken alive. Immediately after the battle, the Somalis counted 15 of their own men dead, with many severely wounded. Next up, Louis Albanese. Albanese's platoon, while advancing through densely covered terrain to establish a blocking position, received intense automatic gunfire from close range. As other members maneuvered to assault the enemy position, PFC Albanese was ordered to provide security for the left flank of the platoon. Suddenly, the left flank received fire from enemies located in a well-concealed ditch. Realizing the imminent danger to his comrades from the fire, Albanese fixed his bayonet and moved aggressively into the ditch. His actions silenced the sniper fire, enabling the platoon to resume movement towards the main enemy position. As the platoon continued to advance, the sound of heavy firing emanated from the left flank from the ditch battle that ensued. In the ditch, which Albanese had entered, the ditch was actually a well-organized complex of enemy defenses designed to bring devastating flanking power on the forces attacking the main position. Albanese, disregarding the danger to himself, advanced 100 meters along the trench and killed 6 of the snipers, who were armed with automatic weapons. Having exhausted his ammunition, Albanese was mortally wounded when he engaged and killed 2 more enemy soldiers in fierce hand-to-hand combat. His unparalleled actions saved the lives of many members of his platoon who would otherwise have fallen. His platoon successfully advanced against enemy forces of overwhelming superiority. This next story is about Felix Conde Falcon. During combat operations against armed enemies in Ap Tan Ho, Republic of Vietnam, on April 4th of 1969, while entering a heavily wooded section of the route of advance, Staff Sergeant Felix and his company encountered an extensive enemy bunker complex, later identified as Battalion Command Post, following tactical artillery airstrikes. Following tactical artillery airstrikes on the heavily secured enemy position, Staff Sergeant Felix' platoon was selected to assault and clear the bunker fortifications. Moving out ahead of his platoon, Staff Sergeant Felix charged the first bunker, heaving grenades. As hostile fire increased, he crawled to a blind side of entrenchment position, jumped to the roof, and tossed a grenade into the bunker. Without hesitating, he proceeded to 2 additional bunkers, both of which he destroyed in the same manner as the first. Rejoining his platoon, Staff Sergeant Felix advanced about 100 meters through the trees before coming under intense hostile fire. Selecting 3 men to accompany him, he maneuvered towards the enemy flank position carrying a machine gun. He single-handedly assaulted the nearest fortifications, killing enemies inside before running out of ammunition. After returning to the 3 men with an empty weapon and taking up an M16 rifle, he concentrated on the next bunker. Within 10 meters of his goal, Staff Sergeant Felix was shot by an unseen assailant and soon died of his wounds. And this is going to be the last story we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Garfield Langhorne. Garfield's platoon was inserted into a landing zone to rescue 2 pilots from a Cobra helicopter shot down by enemy fire on a heavy timbered slope. He provided radio coordinates with the command and control aircraft overhead while troops hacked their way through defense, overgrown, and the wreckage. While the troops hacked their way through dense overgrowth to the wreckage, where both aviators were found dead. As the men were taking the bodies to a pickup site, they suddenly came under intense fire from the North Vietnamese soldiers in camouflage bunkers to the front and the right flank. Within minutes, they were surrounded. Garfield immediately radioed for help from the orbiting gunship, which began to place minigun and rocket fire on the aggressors. The platoon leader and another man operating the radio and providing cover fire for the wounded who had been moved to the center of the small perimeter. Darkness soon fell, making it impossible for the gunship to give accurate support, and the aggressive began to probe the perimeter. An enemy hand grenade landed in front of Garfield and a few feet from personnel who had become casualties. Choosing to protect these wounded, he unhesitantly threw himself onto the grenade, scooped beneath his body, and absorbed the blast. By sacrificing himself, he saved the lives of his comrades. And with that, that'll wrap up the stories of these great men who have sacrificed their lives, gave the greatest sacrifice for this country, for their own soldiers, for their own comrades. I appreciate you for watching this video. If you would, please give it a like. Give me your thoughts down below. Give me your favorite stories of heroism in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.
What's so proud?